Hello, Kate. A very good evening to Melbourne. You're from London.
Hello.
Hello. So glad to have you with you. And
Thank
Kate,
you.
yeah, the floor really is you. We've been working together for many years. I said it on the webinar already. You've been somebody who's been using the startup genome metrics, but you've also been a candid, a critical voice. Sometimes have helped us improve what we are doing. A very vocal voice in the global network, the members network. So we are so happy and delighted to have you here, and we would really love to just hear from you. If you could share a little bit, how do you use the data? How do you use the metrics? What do you practically, what I've been presenting here when you sit in Melbourne and in your vibrant and very successful ecosystem? We've been speaking about that 2 weeks ago. Impressive story. So I'd really love to
Yeah.
hear from you for a little while. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here, and hello to everybody on the call. So we've been using Startup Genome's data since LaunchVic, which is the state government startup agency, was brought into inception just under 4 years ago. And it's I think, you know, we can't understate the importance of Startup Genome's data in helping us grow as an ecosystem. I think when you're starting out, it's really easy to sort of focus locally, but ultimately startup ecosystems and startups themselves are a global game. And what matters is how you're comparing and how you're learning against what's happening around the rest of the world. And so I think the startup genome data has been unbelievably helpful in helping us formulate our approach. And, you know, we're very proud of what we achieved. Our ecosystem's doubled in size since year on year, since 2018. We're now a challenger ecosystem. I think a few years ago we weren't really that, you know, high up in any of the ecosystem rankings. So I think there's a lot that we've taken from the data that's helped us implement opportunities to grow. And I think there are 2 points that I could really pick out. About 2 years ago, one of the areas that we thought we were doing quite well on was local connectedness. And JF was on the call and had to break the news to me, despite the work that we've done. We actually weren't doing very well on local connectedness. There was a lot of activity, but it wasn't activity that was resulting in outcomes. And as a result of us hearing that, we started to run events and really hammered home the fact that we had all these people in a room, and being in a room is not just about coming to listen to a startup speaker speak and then leave. You want to engage, you want to find out what people do, seek potential investors, seek potential customers, and really encourage that activity. So it's been a real mantra of ours to encourage that local connectedness. And in this year's results, we're actually doing, I think, better than average, which is really great. So that's one example of where, you know, data from Startup Genome helped us. And actually, it was very low cost. It wasn't a program we had to put in place. We were already running a huge number of events. It was just about reminding people about the importance of local connectedness. And it's not just about showing up to an event. You actually need to connect. And us just reiterating that message has made a difference. Another example is our finance data. And it's fair to say that while Melbourne is doing really well in a lot of areas, one of the areas that we had a gut feel we weren't doing particularly well was the investor landscape. We don't have a large number of VCs. We only had 2 active angel groups. And through the data that we've got from Startup Genome, we've been able to benchmark ourselves against the rest of the world and take that data to government and say, look, we really are underperforming and our sector is very important. There's lots of things we can do and create jobs, and particularly in this environment post-COVID. But, you know, at the end of the day, what matters is us being able to present data that's going to help influence government to make funding decisions to us, which we then make funding decisions into this community, as well as policy changes. So again, Startup Genome's data has been incredibly useful in helping us formulate that approach and designing the programs that we put in place.
Kate, thanks so much for the quick overview. Delighted to hear how the data have helped you turn around an event strategy, a community strategy. And the one element I find is particularly interesting, you mentioned it is not a lot of money. Sometimes, not only sometimes, as an analyst, I see a lot of policy, a lot of activity, a lot of resource investment that sometimes is not well calibrated. So people put a lot of resource, a lot of effort, a lot of sweat, and a lot of taxpayers' money ultimately into a number of initiatives that are not perfectly calibrated. And just by doing some tweaks, and you mentioned what you did in your event strategy, you get very different outcomes. So a small data point, a small sets of data points that allows to correct for a multi-year strategy and repurpose taxpayers' money ultimately, and with all our efforts. That's incredibly great to hear. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, how many times do you use the data? Is this something where you would say, I need these metrics every 3 months, I need them every 6 months?
Yeah.
Are there politicians maybe picking up on it in their regular briefing meetings where you have to provide a number of data points?
Yeah, we would actively use the data at least every 6 months when we have to report to government. We also use it in our budget bids that we prepare to government to ask for funding. But more importantly, we use it all the time in reporting to the sector, because it's not just about as an agency responsible for growing the startup ecosystem. Yes, a big part of our job is about getting government to support us and understanding the importance of the startup sector. And there's a whole raft of information, not only the data that we get from Startup Genome, but more broadly the narrative that Startup Genome provides through their reports that provide really useful proof points. And so a big part of my job is talking to government and convincing them that this sector is a sector that's worth investing in. And that at times can be challenging when you're competing with other sectors. But the other thing is we need to be talking to the ecosystem. And, you know, I'm out and about giving talks all the time, and I'll rarely go a talk where I don't mention the ecosystem valuation or the number of startups or something along those lines, so that we, you know, are talking to the community about raising optimism, encouraging more people to start startups, helping startups connect with investors, helping startups understand some of the challenges in the ecosystem and what they can do to help address that, or indeed talking to investors about the fact that we do need to really radically improve our investor landscape if we're going to be globally competitive as an ecosystem. So we use the data formally at least every 6 months, but informally we would use it weekly.
That's impressive.